Hi everyone, it's Danzen here. We are currently on day 15 of our programming journey in 100 days of code challenge. And today I have made some summarizations of create and run simple C Sharp console application, which is the part 2 of foundational C Sharp with Microsoft. Essentially, it's cover installation and setup, calling methods, decision logic, working with arrays, and creating readable code. Let's get started. As you can see here, there are total of 3 notes I have made so far with the second part, which is start with basic knowledge and understanding, applicable tips and common mistakes that usually developers do, finally equation and problem solving. I'm gonna cover one by one. Okay, start with the basic knowledge and understanding. So here is the simple way to start coding in C Sharp but inside Visual Studio Code. You need a proper setup. Here's how you can get the Visual Studio Code up and running. First, install Visual Studio Code, download it from this link code.visualstudio.com, then install .NET 8 SDK. You could download it from .NET.microsoft.com. After you're all set with your installation, now it's time to configure the extension. So basically open the extension view in VS Code, just install the C Sharp dev kit. There will be 2 more extensions which are C Sharp and .NET install tool, but don't worry, it will be automatically covered up by C Sharp development kit. And then you want to install IntelliCode for C Sharp development kit for AI assisted development. So essentially, this extension will become in handy for your coding process and learning. It acts like mini documentation inside of your Visual Studio Code. Alright, next step is to create a new console. So open terminal command prompt. Don't forget to type .NET version to check .NET SDK availability. Then .NET new console -o/c# project/test project. Finally, type .NET build so you can get the new template up and ready for code. Now it's time to run the application. Go to Explorer view, right click on test project folder. You will see there is an open integrated terminal menu. Click it and go back to the terminal command, then type .NET run. We are now on the second module, methods and .NET class library. So method basically is the same thing like function. A method is a block of code which only runs when it is called. There are 2 types of methods which are stateful and stateless, where stateful needs an object while stateless doesn't need an object and usually use static like public static void. This is basically how you can create instance from class, start with random as class, dice as a new object created, assign to new operator, and random with method invocation operator. Now, how can you actually call a method? Here's the way you can call a method. Dice as an object, dot as a member access operator, then you could put any method that within the random class like next. Now, we will see on the right side here, integer as the return type, but there's actually another data type that makes method doesn't return a value, which is void. There are also argument and parameter lists, how to type class, and the important thing here that you need to make the .NET class library documentation or just search it up on learn.microsoft.com as your holy book and make it comfortable every time you want to see the documentation. So finally is overloaded, which is just multiple methods with the same name but different parameter in a class, like this one. There are 13 versions of this max methods, which is quite huge amount. Now, ahead to the next section. Let's quickly break down how decision logic works in programming using if, else if, and else statements. Think of it as like navigating a flowchart. First, evaluate condition with if. Imagine you start at the top of a decision tree. The first decision point is an if statement. If the condition is true, you follow one path. If it's false, you go to the next decision point. Second, exclusive conditions with else if. Next, we have else if statements. These are basically additional checkpoints. If the first condition was false, you check the next one. This process continues, allowing for multiple exclusive conditions. Third, the final check with else. At the end of the decision tree, we have the else statement. This is the fallback option. If none of the previous conditions were true, you follow this path. And remember, this is an optional, you may not using it. So the final thing is combining conditions. We can use comparison operators like less than, greater than, less than, or equal, not equal to create these conditions. Logical operators is the other thing besides the comparison operators like and with double ampersand or with double pipe and not with exclamation mark help combine multiple subconditions. So, by understanding this decision logic, you can control the flow of your program effectively and, of course, boost your algorithm skills. Okay, it's array now. I used to hate array related things, but right now I love it. So, essentially, what is an array? Think of an array as a special container that holds a sequence of related data. It's like a row of lockers, each one storing a piece of information. Zero-based indexing. Arrays using zero-based indexing. This means the first element is at index 0, the second at index 1, and so on. Boundary check. Always be careful not to access an index outside the array's boundaries. Doing so will cause a runtime exception, like trying to open a locker that doesn't exist. Next one is length property. Use the length property to find out how many elements are in the array. It's like checking how many lockers are in the row. For each loop, to iterate through each element in an array, use the for each loop. It temporarily assigns its element to a variable and lets you perform operation on it. And here you can see the implementation of how to initialize an array and access its element, also the for each format or syntax. And the final one is self-explanatory. Since it already has details of explanations, I'm not gonna copy paste it loudly. Alright, second note, applicable tips and common mistakes that usually developers do, especially if you are a beginner. Here you can see a bunch of tips and common mistakes that relevant to the process of coding. I'm not gonna explain it all since most of them are self-explanatory. Basically, like don't forget to use IntelliSense as it will be your close friend while coding. Keep documentation handy. What I mean by handy is sometimes often developer has dual screen or just long rectangle pieces screen, one screen for coding and another screen to look at documentation. So it will significantly much more efficient for your coding work. And etc. You can see and examine yourself about other tips here. As well as the common mistake like incorrect parameters, pure whitespace use, over commenting, which can lead you to inefficient programming process and etc. Down here, I guess this is what you want to look at. Since readable code is one of the most important aspect in programming, left side is code that you should avoid and right side is the code that you want to follow. Following the rules and convention will significantly improve your code readability and better communication with fellow developers. So essentially, clean code is also a skill. Okay, last part of my note here, questions and problem solving. Every developer loves problem solving, isn't it? Here I have a question and for problem solving question for you. You could practice with this. Don't try to look at the solution at the first place, but try to challenge yourself. And if you get stuck, obviously you could see the solution, but try to understand it how and why. Don't just blindly look onto the solution and say, oh, that's the solution. And as you will not learning by doing that. Alright, the challenge final boss question for you. I suggest you use these quick first steps of problem solving tips so you can tackle most of hard problem solving questions like in lead code maybe. So the first one is to understand the problem. Like imagine opening a puzzle box. First, you look at the picture on the box. In programming, this means understanding the problem statements. You could read it loudly, and another important thing is to identify the inputs and where's the outputs. Step 2, break the problem. Next, sort the puzzle pieces by age and colors. In coding, break the problem into smaller tasks. Each piece of the problem should be manageable. Step 3, write an algorithm. Start putting the edges together. Outline a step by step plan for your solution in plain English or pseudocode. Step 4, refactor your code. Finally, once the puzzle is complete, smooth out the pieces and make it look nice. Optimize and clean up your code and test it with different inputs. So, by following these steps, understand, break, write, and refactor, you'll solve problems efficiently. Alright, happy coding! If you found this summarization helpful, like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Until the next day.